Flatlining. For our flatlining sample, you are going to put a 1/2 inch of seam allowance around each edge of your flatlining sample. And you only have to put markings on the top piece of fabric because you're going to place the 2 pieces of fabric together, and any markings you would have put on the other piece would now have disappeared. So as long as the 2 pieces are the same size, as they should be, then you only need markings on one piece of the fabric, the flatlining piece. Now for the pinning. Now for flatlining, we do what we call scatter pinning, as if the pins were kind of scattered around. But on this small sample, that doesn't quite work. But we think that we want to start from the middle and move out, making sure that the 2 pieces are perfectly flat together. And on this sample, the way we're going to do that is we're going to just pin around the outer edges along the seam line. The important thing is that the 2 pieces of fabric are laying perfectly flat together. So you can pat it around to make sure there are no bumps. And we're ready to sew. Now you see this groove right here. That designates the 1/4 inch mark on your foot plate. And we are going to use that to line up the edge of our fabric so that we will be stitching exactly 1/4 inch from our stitch line. Because on flatlining, we don't want the stitches to be on the stitch line when we connect the 2 pieces of fabric together. We want the flatlining stitches to be into the seam allowance and never visible. Now when we are sewing flatlining, we will not be doing any back stitching, and we will be doing each edge as its own line of stitching. We will not be turning any corners as we are stitching. And the reason we do that is so the fabric, if it needs to be rearranged, if there turns out to be a pucker at one of these corners, then it will be really easy to undo the stitching and let that top layer relax. So here we go, we're lined up with the 1/4 inch line. We are not going to backstitch. We are going to sew on a basting stitch length, so that's our 6 stitch length. And we are going to sew to the end of this edge, cut our thread, remove those pins, turn our fabric so that we're ready to start stitching on another edge. No back stitching. So you can see those stitch lines are crisscrossing at the corners. Rotate our fabric again, start another edge. Clip our threads, start again. So the key elements, no back stitching, and every side is its own line of stitching. No turning corners. It feels smooth, so that's a good start. Now we'll take it to the ironing table and see how it looks after some pressing. Now using steam and heat and pressure, we are going to iron the whole sample. And then we are going to examine it to see if there are any bubbles of fabric where one of the layers is not equally dispersed. Now this sample, because it's so small, is really easy to do correctly. But for educational purposes, we are going to imagine that this corner had a bubble. So I'm going to use a seam ripper to remove the stitching just at the corner, about a 1/2 inch in either direction for this sample. Up to 1 inch should be good. We're going to remove all of that stitching, and this is going to allow the excess fabric to move out into that corner and let the bulk of the fabric lay nice and flat. Use our iron to encourage the relaxation. And then I'm going to put a pin on those edges that I'm going to need to restitch. Making sure everything is laying nice and flat. We are going to return to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch the edge again. Notice that I did not backstitch when I rejoined this line of stitching. I just overlapped a few stitches prior. Same as before, start at the edge, sewing until we overlap a few of the stitches on our other line. No back stitching. And there we have it, it's laying nice and flat. It's not the prettiest thing, but that's why the flat lining stitching is into the seam allowance. That is flat lining.